Have you ever just looked around and noticed how much of our world is, well, printed? I mean, everything from books and posters to the label on your drink, it's so everywhere, it's kind of hard to even imagine a world without it. But that world wasn't so long ago, and the story of how we got from there to here, well, it's one of the most revolutionary tales in all of human history.
We think of the internet as the thing that changed how information spreads, right? And it totally did. But centuries before anyone ever logged on, another piece of tech completely rewired the planet. Before that, information moved at the speed of a single human hand.
And this image of a 16th century workshop, it just says it all, doesn't it? Before printing, every single book was a handmade object. You had scribes sitting there for months, sometimes years, copying every single letter. This made books unbelievably rare and expensive. They were treasures, really, only for the absolute wealthiest. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people assume this story starts in Europe, but the first giant leap forward, that didn't happen in the West. The real beginning of this revolution sparked in the East, in China, Japan, and Korea, centuries earlier. So, get this. As far back as the 6th century, China had already figured out woodblock printing. The idea was simple, but honestly, brilliant. You carve characters into a woodblock, slap some ink on it, and press it onto paper, which, by the way, they also invented. This text spread to Japan by the 8th century, and in 868, it was used to create the world's oldest dated printed book that we know of, the Diamond Sutra. And this early printing was just so versatile. Over on the left, that's a page from the Diamond Sutra, a sacred Buddhist text. But this wasn't just for religion. On the right, that's a Japanese ukiyo-e print, capturing the hustle and bustle of city life. I mean, from the sacred to the everyday, this was a seriously sophisticated art form. And we're not just talking about churning out copies here. This was about preserving real beauty. The best craftsmen could carve woodblocks that captured the delicate, flowing lines of calligraphy with incredible precision. It wasn't just printing, it was art. The scale of some of these projects, it's just mind-blowing. Take the Tripitaka Kriana. To create this collection of Buddhist scriptures, craftsmen engraved the entire thing onto more than 80,000 woodblocks. An absolutely staggering amount of work, and it just goes to show how vital printing was long before it ever hit the West.
So, okay, how does this world-changing idea get to Europe? Well, it travels the same way everything else did, along the Silk Road. Paper from China shows up around the 11th century, and a couple hundred years later, guys like Marco Polo are coming back from their travels with stories and knowledge of woodblock printing. The spark had officially crossed continents.
And the timing? Oh, it couldn't have been more perfect. Europe was right in the middle of this huge knowledge boom. You had universities popping up, a new class of merchants who could read. Everyone was hungry for books. The old way of doing things just couldn't keep up. You had all this demand, but the supply was completely broken. Making manuscripts by hand wasn't just slow and expensive. The final products were delicate and hard to even handle. Europe was desperate for a faster, cheaper, and more durable way to make books. So when woodblock printing finally arrives in Europe, it kind of creates this two-tiered system. The aristocrats? They still wanted their fancy, one-of-a-kind, handwritten books on expensive animal skin. They thought printed books were cheap and, a bit common. But for students and merchants, these cheaper copies were a total game changer. Woodblock printing was a massive step, no doubt, but it still had one big limitation. You had to carve an entire page at a time. To really unlock the power of print, Europe needed one more breakthrough, and it came in the 1430s from a German guy named Johannes Gutenberg. What made Gutenberg so special was that he had this really unique mix of skills. He grew up around huge presses for making wine and olive oil. He was also a master goldsmith, so he knew all about working with metals and making precise molds. These separate skills were about to come together and literally change the world. Gutenberg's big idea was really just a brilliant mashup. He took the design of an olive press to create the printing press. Then he used his goldsmithing skills to cast individual letters out of metal. And that was the key, movable type. Instead of carving a whole page, you could just arrange and rearrange letters to print anything you wanted. So the first big test of this new system was printing the Bible. It took about 3 years to make 180 copies. Now, to us, that sounds incredibly slow. But think about it. In that same amount of time, a single scribe could have maybe finished one copy. This was lightning fast. And from here, things just exploded. In the 50 years after Gutenberg, about 20 million books were printed in Europe. A century later, That number jumped to 200 million. This wasn't just a small improvement. This was a revolution on paper. A flood of books like that does way more than just spread information. It completely changes a society. It changes how people relate to knowledge, to authority, to each other. It actually created a whole new kind of public. See, before print, most people lived in an oral culture. Information was something you heard. Texts, stories, news, it was all read aloud in public as a group. But cheap, personal books created a reading public. Suddenly, reading was something you did alone, in silence. And that completely changes how you think and process ideas.
And this shift had this massive domino effect. Cheaper books meant more people reading, which led to more people questioning things. All these new ideas in science, religion, politics could suddenly spread like wildfire, way beyond the control of any king or church. I mean, think about the Protestant Reformation or the scientific revolution. No way they would have happened so fast without the printing press. And what's cool is that it didn't just kill the old oral culture, it blended with it. People were still singing printed ballads in pubs.
You know, the source material for this explainer sums it up perfectly. It says that print transformed the lives of people, changing their relationship to information and knowledge, and with institutions and authorities. It wasn't just a new gadget. It was a tool that rewired our relationship with information and with power itself. The parallel to today is just so powerful, isn't it? That shift from the handwritten word to the printed one remade the world in ways no one at the time could have possibly seen coming. It makes you wonder, as we're living through our own huge shift from print to digital, what are the profound changes happening right now that we won't fully grasp for another 100 years?